He fired every nanny for less. But when Billionaire CEO saw the maid with his sons, he froze. Before we dive in, I want to know where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments so we can see just how far this story reaches. And when we get to the end, I dare you to rate it from 0 to 10, because this one might just break your heart. He thought every door to his past was locked for good until that afternoon. Ethan Carter, the cold, unshakable billionaire CEO of Carter Group, stepped into the sunlit kitchen, expecting the usual silence. But instead, he heard laughter, children's laughter, bright, unrestrained, echoing through the marble and glass, filling spaces that had been empty for months. There, in the deep marble sink, his twin boys sat in warm water, hair dripping into their eyes. Beside them, Naomi, the new maid, was singing, not just any lullaby, but that lullaby, the one his late wife used to hum at bedtime, the one he thought he'd never hear again. His breath caught memory, loss, and something far more dangerous, hope, rushed in all at once. He didn't know if this was an intrusion or a miracle, but one thing was certain: he couldn't walk away. The Carter estate sat in stillness atop a hill on the city's edge, its floor-to-ceiling windows mirroring the winter gray sky. Hallways were lined with thick carpets, furniture placed with military precision, as if nothing in this house dared fall out of order. Yet beneath that elegance was a silence too heavy to ignore, the kind only found in homes that have lost their heart. At 34, Ethan Carter had built an empire from nothing, brick by brick, deal by deal. Each contract, each meeting on the top floor of his skyscraper was another wall in the fortress he hid behind, a fortress built to keep out the one thing he feared most: losing again. Since the day Emily, the love of his life, was taken from him in an accident, this house had known nothing but the click of his laptop keys and the echo of his footsteps on stone. His twin sons, Liam and Lucas, had grown up surrounded by luxury, but deprived of something money could never buy: warmth. Ethan knew it, but he told himself silence was safer. He'd tried every nanny, every caregiver, each one leaving faster than the last. And then came Naomi Brooks, a modeste résumé, quiet eyes, a simple yes to the job, without hesitation. He never imagined she'd be the first breeze to slip through the cracks in the wall he had spent years building. If it were you, would you dare let a stranger into your life, knowing they might get close enough to touch the deepest wound you carry? Share your thoughts in the comments, because by the time this story ends, you might just change your answer. Part 1. The moment he caught her. Afternoon sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows, painting the marble kitchen island in a wash of gold. Normally, at this hour, the Carter estate was silent, just the ticking of the wall clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. But today, the stillness was broken by laughter. Ethan Carter stopped in the middle of the hallway. At 34, the CEO of Carter Group was fresh from the 50th floor of his tower, home earlier than usual. His gray suit was still crisp, tie just loosened, eyes trained out of habit on the numbers and charts still running through his mind until now. Because this sound, this bright, ringing, unmistakable sound, was children's laughter. It reached into the locked places inside him. He heard the gentle trickle of running water, a woman's voice, humming softly, and then he froze. Not just any tune. It was the lullaby Emily used to sing to Liam and Lucas every night, the one he'd avoided for years, afraid it would rip through the defenses he'd spent so long building. His heartbeat stuttered. He quickened his steps. When he rounded the kitchen doorway, the scene stopped him cold. Naomi Brooks, the new maid, was kneeling by the deep marble sink, sleeves rolled high, her hands gently rubbing a towel over Lucas's wet hair. Beside them, Liam kicked at the warm water, giggling. The last light of day wrapped all three of them in a halo that felt impossibly warm. For a moment, Ethan wanted to step back. For another, he wanted to step closer. Instinct won. "What are you doing?" His voice came out lower, sharper than he intended. Naomi startled, hands stilling, eyes wide. They were crying and running a bit warm. I couldn't find the thermometer. I remembered warm water helps. Ethan tightened his grip on his briefcase strap, the words scraping like someone had stepped onto forbidden ground. "You're the maid, not their mother. You don't just—" Her gaze softened, but didn't flinch. There was no one else here. "Sir, I couldn't just let them cry." He drew a deep breath, fighting the strange pull in his chest. The scene was both beautiful and dangerous. Liam held up his tiny wet towel toward Naomi, eyes pleading for her to keep going. Lucas leaned into her shoulder, utterly at peace, and in that instant, Ethan realized his sons had found safety in someone else. Naomi rose, wrapping Lucas in a towel. Ethan watched every movement as if she were touching a piece of his past. He masked his expression. "Next time, you wait for me, or call me first." She nodded, gathered Liam into her arms, and walked toward the nursery without a word. When the sound of her footsteps faded, Ethan noticed the small puddles on the floor, and a tiny sock caught on a chair leg. He picked it up. The faint scent of soap and milk clung to it, pulling him back to nights when Emily bathed the boys. Nights he'd fought hard to forget. He leaned against the counter, sock in hand. Why did they laugh for her like that? And why did it make him feel displaced? That night, after the boys had gone to bed, Ethan passed by the nursery. A soft light glowed from inside, and there it was. Again her voice. Not loud, not showy, just a warm, steady thread of melody. Naomi sat by Lucas's crib, rocking gently. Liam was fast asleep, lips twitching in a dream. Ethan lingered at the doorway, unseen. Until the lullaby ended, it wasn't about her overstepping. The truth was far worse. She had brought the one thing he feared most back into this house intimacy. Lucas's small hand curled around her finger, exactly the way Emily used to soothe them. The next morning, the long dining table had only 2 chairs, pulled out one for Ethan, one for Naomi as she fed the boys. They hardly spoke, but the air felt different. Naomi dabbed milk from Liam's lip. Ethan's eyes followed her, not to catch mistakes, but to search for something else. She didn't apologize, didn't explain, and that, somehow, made him more uneasy because it forced him to ask himself, do I really want her to stop? When she lifted Lucas from his chair, the boy nestled against her neck, glancing at his father as if to say, you don't know it, but I'm okay now. That evening, Ethan returned late. He opened the door, expecting silence, but was met instead with laughter and the faint scent of lavender. The kitchen was empty. The sound came from the living room. Naomi sat cross-legged on the rug, clinking spoons with Liam and Lucas in some made-up game. He stepped to the doorway and stayed there. No interruptions this time, no questions, just watching. And when Lucas laughed a deep, unguarded laugh Ethan had never heard before, something inside him softened. He said nothing, but he knew a line had been crossed, and it hadn't broken. It had shifted. Lucas caught his father's gaze and smiled a smile free of fear. Part 2. The Emergency Fever. Thursday morning began with the smell of coffee and the gentle patter of rain against the dining room windows. Ethan sat at the table, laptop open, eyes scanning over forecasts and figures, his mind already in the afternoon strategy meeting. The first cry came from upstairs horse. Urgent. He looked up, frowning. The second followed quickly, sharper, slicing through the air like glass. Before he could react, Naomi appeared at the top of the stairs. Her hair was tied back, but damp strands clung to her forehead with sweat. Mr. Carter Lucas has a high fever. Liam's running warm too. Her voice was steady, not panicked, but urgent enough to pull him to his feet. Ethan took the stairs 2 at a time. The nursery door stood open, the air thick with heat and the faint, sour smell of sweat. Lucas's cheeks were flushed, his eyes unfocused. Liam whimpered in his crib, clutching at his blanket. Naomi knelt between them, her palms moving with precise, practiced motions, checking each forehead in turn. When she bent toward Lucas and whispered, "It's okay. I'm here." Ethan heard it, the voice of someone who had seen how quickly a fever could steal a life. Naomi lifted Liam and placed him in Ethan's arms. He held the boy awkwardly, feeling the heat seeping through his shirt. "Keep him upright. Don't let him lie down. I'll get warm water and electrolyte solution." She didn't wait for his answer, just placed Lucas in a portable bassinet and wheeled him toward the kitchen. Ethan followed, his pulse quickening. The kitchen transformed into a makeshift emergency station. Naomi moved between the sink, a bowl of warm water, clean towels, a measuring cup, and the clock on the wall. No cold water. You lower the temperature gradually. To avoid shock, she instructed, wrapping Lucas in a damp towel, pressing it gently to his neck and underarms. Ethan watched her hands strong, controlled, sure, and realized he was learning how to care for his own children from the maid, a truth that, until this moment, he never thought he'd allow. Lucas's eyes fluttered open, weak but calmer, as Naomi whispered, "We'll get through this." Just like Elijah did. Ethan caught the name but didn't have time to ask. As he switched towels for Liam under her direction, Naomi spoke in a low, even tone, though emotion rippled beneath the surface. "My brother, Elijah, had fevers like this more than once. Once we didn't make it to the hospital in time. I learned every way to keep him safe. Until the day—" She stopped, drew a breath, tightened the towel in her hands, and focused back on Lucas. The thermometer blinked. 101. Ustigra. Still high, but down from earlier. Naomi exhaled, her shoulders easing. "Good. They're responding." Ethan looked at his sons, then at Naomi. For the first time, she didn't feel like an employee in the house, but part of the fragile circle that kept his boys safe. When Lucas drifted off on Naomi's chest, his small fists gripping her shirt, Ethan saw a level of trust he hadn't reclaimed since Emily died. The only sound in the kitchen was the ticking of the clock. Naomi dried Liam's forehead and laid him beside his brother. Ethan sat at the table, one hand resting on the wood, a strange mix of gratitude and shame rising in him. "You did well," he said, each word deliberate. She only nodded, gathering the towels and bottles. He wanted to ask about Elijah, wanted to understand how a woman so quiet could handle a crisis like a seasoned medic, but he kept his silence. The kitchen felt impossibly wide, the hush broken only by the soft breathing of 2 boys finding their rhythm again. Naomi didn't look at him, but her shoulders lowered the smallest sign she had let go of some private weight. That night, Ethan didn't retreat to his study. He stayed in the nursery, watching as Naomi checked temperatures, adjusted blankets, and hummed a tune. It was Emily's lullaby again, but this time, her voice didn't drag him into grief. It built a bridge between what he'd lost and what was here now. When she finally left, Ethan remained in the dim glow of the nightlight, eyes on the 2 sleeping faces. He knew, without Naomi today, the ending could have been very different, and he didn't want to imagine how different. He brushed his fingers over Lucas's small hand, feeling the warmth. Looking up, he found Naomi standing quietly at the door. For a moment, their eyes met, not as employer and employee, but as 2 people who had just protected something irreplaceable. Part 3. The photograph. The boy's fevers had broken a few days ago. That afternoon, the Carter estate was unusually still. Rain fell outside in long, silver threads, clinging to the tall window panes, like forgotten memories. Ethan had no meetings on his calendar, a rarity. He headed to the laundry room in search of fresh sheets for Lucas, who had just spilled an entire bottle of milk across his mattress. The laundry room sat at the far end of a side hallway, rarely visited by anyone but Naomi. Under the cold glow of the ceiling light, everything here felt too clean, too orderly. Ethan opened the tall wooden cabinet where Naomi kept the folded linens. The bottom shelf was stacked with blankets and sheets, folded so precisely he could have measured the corners with a ruler. As he pulled out a beige-fitted sheet, something small and thin slipped to the floor. He bent down. It was a photograph worn, its edges curled, face down on the tile. When he turned it over, his breath caught. Naomi, years younger, smiling wide, unguarded. Beside her sat a young boy in a wheelchair, his face alight, one hand raised as if mid-wave. His smile wasn't the easy kind. It was forged through challenge, through days spent fighting something far bigger than himself. Ethan sank into the small wooden chair beside the washer, the photograph in hand. The boy's eyes were uncannily like Naomi's, only brighter, more open. He noticed the thin blanket over the boy's legs, the slight curl in his fingers, signs of a long-term illness. He remembered Naomi's calm precision during the boy's fever. The name she'd whispered, Elijah, he had never asked. In truth, he had never wanted to know more about her than what the job required. Now, curiosity mingled with something else. Recognition. He knew loss. He knew what it meant to care for someone fragile for a long time. What he didn't know was why she had never told him. Carefully, he slid the photograph back between the layers of folded sheets, closing the cabinet as if nothing had happened. But he knew he had stepped into a part of her story he would not forget. The boy's trusting gaze, locked on Naomi in the picture, followed him even after he left the room. That evening, Naomi was folding laundry in the living room when Ethan appeared in the doorway. He didn't step in right away, just watched her hands move slowly, deliberately, as though each shirt carried its own history. "It's been raining all day," he said evenly. Naomi looked up, a faint smile touching her lips. Yes, but the boys love listening to the rain. He nodded, ready to say something, maybe about the photograph. But when he met her eyes, calm and unguarded, he stopped, not because he feared the answer, but because he realized if she hadn't chosen to share it yet, it was still a memory that needed protecting. Instead, he stepped forward, picked up one of Liam's tiny shirts, and tried folding it the way she did. Naomi glanced at him, surprised, but said nothing. In that moment, Ethan realized he was learning something more valuable than a folding technique. He was learning how to be present without trespassing on someone's private space. In the days that followed, Ethan began noticing more about Naomi, not to monitor, but to understand the way she always tested the bathwater before letting the boys in, how she lowered her voice when Lucas looked uncertain, how she smiled softly when Liam pulled one of his mischiefs. He never said it aloud, but a quiet respect began to form. She wasn't just here to work. She was part of the fragile piece he thought was gone forever. And every time the photograph came to mind, the truth grew clearer. Naomi knew how to love someone breakable because she had done it before. One evening, when Lucas couldn't sleep, Naomi sat at his bedside, singing softly. From the doorway, Ethan saw not just her, but the boy in the wheelchair, Elijah, smiling through the years, and he understood that love had never disappeared. It had simply found a new anchor. Late one night, as Naomi tidied the kitchen, Ethan walked in. He wanted to mention the photograph, to ask who Elijah was, to say he had seen it, and that he understood at least in part. But instead, he said, "Thank you for what you do for the boys." Naomi paused, then gave a small nod. "I just want them to feel safe." He looked at her a beat longer than usual before turning away. Some things, he knew, lose their meaning if spoken too soon. In the soft yellow light, Naomi stood in the wide kitchen, her hands still damp from the dishes, her eyes steady but shadowed with a quiet sorrow. Ethan knew she had a story, and he was willing to wait for the day she chose to tell it. Part 4. The night the lights went out. All evening, the sky pressed low, swallowing what little light the day had left. A thin rain clung to the windows, the wind scraping against the glass in long, lonely howls. Ethan was in his study, reading over reports on his laptop, when the entire estate went dark. The hum of the backup generator didn't come dead silent. For a breath, there was nothing. Then came Liam's cry, sharp, panicked. Lucas's followed, higher pitched, cutting straight through the dark. Ethan shut his laptop with a snap, heart pounding. He looked into the blackened hallway, but didn't move right away. Old reflexes gripped him. Memories of trying to comfort them in the past, and failing, kept his feet rooted. Then footsteps, light but steady. Naomi. She didn't call for him. She went straight to the kitchen, opened the lower cabinet, and pulled out a box of emergency candles. The strike of a match was loud in the stillness, the tiny flame flaring, then multiplying as she lit another. In the trembling, golden glow, her face was calm, no panic, no hesitation. Her eyes were steady, like someone who had weathered nights like this before. Naomi scooped Liam into her arms, pulling Lucas close with her free hand. Their cries softened as she began to sing low and steady, enough to drown out the storm outside. Ethan stood in the living room doorway, not yet stepping in. It was too familiar and too far away. Emily used to sing like that, but Naomi's voice was different. She didn't try to hide her fatigue. She sang as if she was willing to stay in the fear with them, instead of pretending it wasn't there. He walked closer, slow, careful not to shatter the moment. Naomi didn't stop, only tilted her head slightly, signaling him to sit. She placed Liam in his arms, adjusting the boy until his cheek rested against his father's chest. "Just hold him still. Let him hear your heartbeat," she murmured, not a suggestion, but an invitation. And when Liam's small body pressed against him, Ethan felt it, their rhythm sinking. It had been so long since he realized they even shared one. The dark pulled everything nearer. Candlelight flickered in Naomi's eyes as she cradled Lucas. The room was so still. Ethan could hear all three of them breathing. "I was afraid." His voice was quiet, but steady. Naomi looked up. "Shumho." "Afraid I'd never be enough for them, that if I tried and failed to comfort them, they'd see I'm not Emily." She didn't answer right away, only held his gaze, as if waiting for him to finish. "They don't need another Emily, Ethan. They need you, even when you don't know what to do." The words were soft, like a hand on his shoulder, but heavy enough to shift something deep inside him. Her eyes in that moment didn't just speak about the boys. They spoke to the part of him that had abandoned himself. Lucas's breathing had slowed into sleep. Naomi laid him gently in the portable crib, then took the chair across from Ethan. A long silence stretched between them. Without thinking, he reached out and placed his hand over hers. No grip, no pull, just warmth. Naomi flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "Thank you," he said slowly. Each word weighted. "You don't thank someone for loving," she replied. Her hand was warm, grounding him. For the first time in months, Ethan felt less alone, not because she could fix everything, but because she was willing to bear it with him. The candlelight danced across their joined hands, revealing a faint tremor only someone close would notice. The generator kicked on, light seeping back into the room, but neither of them moved. Liam had fallen asleep in Ethan's arms, his head tilted toward Naomi. In the new light, the tears on Ethan's cheeks caught the glow. This time, he didn't wipe them away. He let them stay, a quiet proof that his heart could still feel. Naomi stood, gently taking Liam to place him beside his brother. Before leaving, she gave Ethan one last look, a slow, almost imperceptible nod, and he knew, tonight, part of the wall around his heart had come down. When she left, the faint scent of lavender lingered with the fading wax of the candle. Ethan stayed there, realizing he didn't want to go back to his study. Part 5. The first laugh. Morning light streamed through the living room windows, laying soft golden stripes across the gray carpet. The Carter estate felt different today, quiet, but not hollow. No background music, no clacking keys from the study. Ethan was at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee, when he noticed Naomi spreading a thin blanket across the rug. She laid Liam and Lucas down opposite each other, a few small wooden toys in between. Lucas was still the quiet one, watchful, reserved. Since Emily's death, Ethan had never once heard him laugh. The boy seemed to always be searching for something no one else could see. Naomi didn't rush. She sat cross-legged beside them, her face level with theirs. "Lucas, look at this," she said softly, pulling a fox hand puppet over her fingers, moving it slowly in front of him. Her voice was low and warm. Ethan started to leave but stopped at the doorway. He didn't want to miss whatever was about to happen. When Naomi had the fox puppet fall asleep and then pop up with a playful boo, Liam burst into giggles. Lucas didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth twitched. She kept going. Now, with both hands, a fox and a rabbit acting out a tug of war over a wooden cookie. Her voice shifted high, low, with a child's playful lilt. Liam was doubled over with laughter, while Lucas reached a hand toward the rabbit. Naomi made the fox topple over dramatically, covering its face and crying. Lucas's eyes widened. Then, a short sound, half cough, half chuckle escaped him. Naomi froze, her eyes lighting up. "Did you just laugh, Lucas?" Ethan's heart kicked hard in his chest. He set down his coffee and stepped closer. Lucas glanced at his father and, as if encouraged, let out a full, clear laugh, short, but enough to shatter the fog that had hung over the house for so long. Ethan's vision blurred. His son wasn't just laughing. He was laughing with him in the room. The air felt brighter than the sunlight. Naomi turned the moment into a game, pretending to fall or squeal whenever Lucas touched the puppet. Each time, his laughter grew longer, freer. Liam joined in, wrapping his arms around his brother. Ethan knelt down beside them, resting a hand gently on Lucas's back. The boy didn't pull away. In that instant, Ethan knew he wasn't standing outside the wall anymore. He was inside, with them. Later, when the boys were napping, Ethan found Naomi in the kitchen, rinsing small plastic cups, her hair tied neatly back. "Naomi," he said, his voice lower than usual. She turned, brows lifting slightly. "Thank you for that laugh today." She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "That was Lucas. I just knocked on the right door." He wanted to say more, but stopped, not because he lacked the words, but because he feared they might spill over too much. Instead, he nodded, holding her gaze a moment longer than necessary. Naomi noticed, but didn't look away. Sometimes, the thank yous left unexplained are the ones that linger the longest. That night, Ethan sat in his study without opening his laptop. On the desk lay a blank sheet of paper. He began to write, not to archive, but to make sure he never forgot. Lucas's first laugh, Liam's shining eyes, and the way Naomi looked at them, as if they were the safest part of her world. He realized the laugh wasn't just for his son. It was for him, too, a reminder that joy doesn't vanish. It only waits for the right moment to come back. When he set down the pen, Ethan felt lighter, as if he had stepped through a door. And this time, he knew he wouldn't close it again. Part 6. The Chance to Leave. That morning, the kitchen was awash in early sunlight. Naomi was pouring milk for Liam and Lucas when her phone buzzed on the counter. An email popped up, the subject short and sharp. "Congratulations. You've been accepted." Her pulse kicked. She opened it, an offer from an international preschool in Portland. The job she'd applied for 3 months ago, long before she ever knew the Carter family. A stable salary, gentle hours, exactly in line with the degree she'd studied for. And more than that, it was a piece of her dream. A place to build a career of her own, independent of anyone else. Naomi's eyes drifted toward the dining table. Liam was carefully holding his spoon, Lucas leaning back in his chair, his eyes bright, as Ethan, still in his dress shirt from an early meeting, sat beside him, slicing strawberries into neat halves. The picture was so peaceful, it made her chest ache, because she knew if she said yes to that email, she'd be walking away from this. She meant to tell Ethan that morning, but he was locked in back-to-back online meetings. By lunchtime, when she brought him coffee, he was frowning at a financial forecast on his screen. "Ethan, I need to tell you something," she said slowly. He looked up, but his phone rang before she could continue. He mouthed sorry and lifted it to his ear. "Give me 10 minutes, Naomi." She nodded and stepped out, but 10 minutes stretched into the entire afternoon. When he finally came downstairs, Naomi was on the floor with Lucas, showing him how to paint with watercolors. Liam's laughter filled the room. Ethan leaned on the doorframe, watching for a long moment before joining their game, and she realized saying she was leaving right then would be like cutting into a wound that had only just begun to heal. That night, the wind was sharp. Naomi sat on the porch, the email open on her phone again. "Reply within 5 days?" The line read, heavy as stone. Her mind flashed back to the months before this house. Short-term rentals, patchwork jobs, turning down things she wanted because there was no one to look after her mother. The preschool job wasn't just a step forward, it was security. But since coming here, everything had shifted. Liam hugging her before bed, Lucas finding her hand when something scared him, and Ethan, still guarded, but with a gaze that had changed in ways he didn't say out loud. A gust carried the scent of lavender from the garden. It reminded her, sometimes, home isn't the place you dream about. It's the place you're most afraid to lose. The next morning, Naomi took the boys to the park. Liam was busy on the slide, while Lucas sat in her lap, gripping a toy car. An older woman took the bench beside her. "Yours?" she asked, nodding toward the boys. "No, I just take care of them." "So you'll be leaving one day," the woman said plainly, her eyes kind but searching. Naomi hesitated. "Probably. I just got offered a job I once dreamed about." The woman smiled faintly. "Dreams and the needs of the heart aren't always the same thing. Don't mix them up." "Dear." Naomi didn't speak for the rest of the walk home. The woman's words clung to her, making each step toward the estate feel slower. As she opened the gate, Lucas wrapped his arms around her neck in a sudden, tight hug, as if he knew their time together was counting down. That evening, Naomi finally decided to tell Ethan. He was clearing papers from the dining table. "Ethan," she began, but Lucas's cry from upstairs cut her off. Ethan dropped the papers and followed her up. Lucas was tangled in his blanket, caught in a nightmare. He clung to Naomi, his small hands fisting her shirt. She gathered him close and began to sing. Ethan stood beside them, watching for a long time. "Naomi, I don't know what we'd do without you," he said quietly, so honest it made her want to freeze time. The words lodged in her throat, blocking the ones she'd meant to say. I'm leaving. Instead, she smiled, kept singing, and tucked the moment away, because now she knew this decision wouldn't be easy. Sometimes, one unplanned sentence is all it takes to make the ground shift under your feet. Part 7. Tears in the Hallway. The Carter estate was always quiet at night. But tonight, the silence carried a different weight. It was the kind that pressed in, deep and heavy, like standing in front of a closed door, knowing exactly what was behind it, and not being ready to face it. The hallway sconces had gone dark hours ago. Only a thin line of soft golden light slipped from the nursery's door, stretching across the polished oak floor. The scent of warm oak wood mingled with the faint lavender drifting from the diffuser, wrapping the air in a calm that should have soothed him, yet left him uneasy. Ethan stood in the shadows, shoulder against the wall, hands deep in his pockets. He hadn't meant to stop here, but his feet had betrayed him. And then he heard it, Naomi's voice, a quiet lullaby, the one Emily used to sing to Liam and Lucas when they were barely big enough to hold in one arm, a melody only the two of them had known. Each note pressed against the wall he had built over the past 3 years. Memories swept in Emily in the rocking chair by the window, hair loose over her shoulders, Lucas curled in her lap, while Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching. His throat tightened. The ache was sharp, tangled with longing he hadn't dared touch in years. By the time Naomi reached the last line, Ethan felt the sting in his eyes. The first tear slipped before he could stop it. He drew a deep breath, trying to push it back. But that only made his chest seize harder. A man who could sign contracts worth hundreds of millions without blinking, now trembling because of a lullaby. The singing stopped. He heard the soft rustle of a blanket being pulled up, the faint creak of the crib, the careful steps of someone who didn't want to wake sleeping children. The nursery door eased shut, the light swallowed by the dark. Ethan thought about stepping forward, but his hand brushed the wall instead, holding him in place. He didn't want her to know he'd been listening, didn't want her to see these tears. A breeze slipped through the slightly open hall window, lifting the silk curtain. The lavender scent deepened, blended with something else. Honey, almond, Emily's favorite fabric softener for the boys' blankets. He closed his eyes, and there it was again, like it had never left Emily, standing in this very hallway, Liam in her arms, telling him, "We have everything we need now." Ethan, he had believed it would last forever. Now, Naomi had brought back the sound of children's laughter in this corridor, the patter of small feet, and deep inside, he feared that if she left, the cold emptiness would return. Sometimes, the worst loss isn't losing another person. It's being dragged back to the place you barely survived the first time. Footsteps approached from the far end. Naomi appeared, wearing a thin cardigan, a glass of water in her hand. Light from the living room behind her caught in her brown hair. She startled slightly at the sight of Ethan, half hidden in shadow. "Ethan, you're still up." He turned slightly, eyes faintly red. "Just not tired." She stepped closer. The light from a floor lamp grazed the side of his face, revealing the weariness and the dampness at the corners of his eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, her tone careful but warm. He gave a faint, defensive smile. "I'm fine. Just too much work." Naomi didn't answer right away. She moved closer, close enough that he caught the faint, clean scent of her soap. Something simple and steady, the kind that made him want to breathe deeper. In her gaze, he saw what he wasn't ready to face, genuine concern, untouched by obligation or gain. He looked away, not out of coldness, but because if he held her gaze any longer, the words would spill. "Naomi, Don't leave the boys. Don't leave me. Some looks are powerful enough to shatter silence, powerful enough to terrify you into keeping it. Naomi hesitated, then set her glass down on the console table and met his eyes again. Ethan, if there's something you want to say, just say it. I won't judge. The sentence cut like a knife and wrapped like an embrace at the same time. He wanted to tell her, wanted to say that since she'd come. This house had laughter again, that he dreaded the day she left, and the hallways echoed with nothing but the wind. But the words stayed locked behind his teeth. A colder voice in his head spoke instead. She has her own life. Don't be selfish. Don't keep her just because you're afraid of being alone. Naomi waited. Her gaze softened. But when he stayed silent, she gave a small nod, picked up her glass, and turned away. Her footsteps faded, leaving him in the dark. Ethan pressed his palm against the wall, the chill sinking into his skin. Opportunities to hold on to someone sometimes last only seconds, and when you let them pass, you spend years wondering, what if I'd said it? He stood there for a while longer before heading to his room, closing the door. He glanced once more at the darkened hallway behind him. In his chair, head bowed, hands covering his face. The second tear came not just for Emily, but for Naomi, for the woman who was in his life now, but could walk away at any time. Softly, to no one but himself, he whispered, if I get another chance, I'll say it. But part of him knew a promise meant nothing if fear was still in control. And fear was what had cost him Emily. He couldn't let it take Naomi, too. Lifting his head into the darkness, his heart still pounding half from the tears, half from the decision forming, he knew one thing for certain. He would not let Naomi walk out that door without knowing what he really wanted. A man the world called unbreakable was most afraid of the moment he would have to say, please stay. Part 8. Emily's Letter. Emily's bedroom sat at the far end of the east wing, cut off from the rest of the house. For 3 years, the door had stayed mostly shut, opened only when the staff came to dust at Ethan's request. Even then, he never stayed nearby. To him, that room was a sealed chamber of memory. One wrong move, and the whole of his heart might come apart. Tonight, the hallway was so still he could hear his own heartbeat. The soft amber light from the sconces broke into uneven patterns along the polished floor. Ethan stood before the door, hand on the cool brass knob, feeling like he was about to stand trial, where he would be both judge and defendant. He couldn't say exactly why he was here. Maybe it was Naomi's lullaby the night before. Maybe it was the sight of her walking away down this same hallway, making him realize that if he kept clinging to the past, he'd lose the present, too. But deep down, he knew the truest reason. He was afraid he'd already forgotten what Emily's face looked like when she laughed. The latch clicked softly. The moment the door opened, her scent rushed in the cherry wood of the wardrobe, blending with the faint trace of white gardenia, the linen spray she used on the bed sheets. For a second, he was back 3 springs ago, stepping into the room while Emily sat at her writing desk. Everything was exactly as it had been. White curtains draped lightly over the windows, the bookshelf by the sill, the empty glass vase on her vanity, everything neat, untouched. As if she'd only stepped out for a moment and would be back any second, he crossed to the writing desk. The velvet chair was slightly turned, as though someone had just stood. On the surface, next to a closed journal, lay a cream-colored envelope. In familiar, slanted handwriting for Ethan. Read when you're ready. His hand stilled in midair. His fingers trembled as they brushed the edge of the paper. How long had this been here? And why was it only now that he could bring himself to touch it? He pulled the chair out and sat down. The desk lamp cast a warm halo over the envelope. his heart hammered, not just urging him forward, but warning him. Finally, he broke the seal and slid out a single sheet of paper. The edges faintly yellowed with time. The first line stole his breath. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here to hold your hand. Sometimes, words written years ago can strike the present harder than anything spoken face to face. Ethan's hands shook as his eyes moved over Emily's looping script. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here to hold your hand. I know you'll hate that I've left something to force you to feel. But Ethan, I also know that if I didn't, you'd lock yourself away in that armor you wore long before we ever met. Her voice was in his ear, soft, warm, but unyielding. Do you remember the first time we met? At Carter Group's launch party, you were surrounded by 100 people, holding your drink like a shield. I thought, this man doesn't know just how lonely he is. But then you looked at me, and your first smile broke through everything. He swallowed hard. Oh, he remembered. Emily in her sea green dress, eyes catching the light like they could keep it forever, and he half ready to run, half unable to move. I know loss will make you want to close every door, even when someone's been knocking for a long time. But love doesn't run out when you give it to someone new. It expands, like when you first held Liam and Lucas. You didn't love me less. Right. His chest tightened. For years, he'd told himself that loving again would mean betraying her. Now, Emily herself was telling him the opposite. He kept reading. When the day comes that your heart stirs for someone, don't run. Don't think I'd be angry or disappointed. I'd be happy, Ethan, because the only thing I wanted when I had to leave was for you to still know how to love, to still let someone pass those walls. The last line clenched in his fist. And when that moment comes, don't let them go just because you're afraid of losing them. Hold on, like you held my hand in that crowded room the night we met. The rest of the world disappeared. It was just him, the letter, and the pounding in his ears. A tear slid down, falling directly onto her ink, the dark line blooming as if it could carry some of his grief with it. Some words you never imagine you'll hear until the person is gone, and they've left them behind for you to find. He set the letter on the desk, his hand still resting over it, as if it might stay warm if he held it long enough. Leaning back, he stared at the ceiling, breathing through the tide surging in his chest. But no matter how much pain the words stirred, there was something else beneath it, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Hope. At the window, the garden glistened faintly in the drizzle. The lavender bushes Emily had planted stood steady in the wind. He thought of Naomi, quiet, steadfast, present without demanding thanks. Ethan slid the letter into the bottom desk drawer. Alongside the most private things, he owned a photo of Emily with the twins as newborns, a pair of silver cufflinks. But before closing it, he took out a blank sheet of paper. The pen trembled in his hand as he wrote not a contract, not a corporate memo, but a promise to himself. When the moment comes, I will not stay silent. I will hold on to what makes my heart live again. He folded it and placed it on top of Emily's letter, like asking her to witness it. A knock at the door startled him. Liam stood there, sleepy-eyed, clutching his teddy bear. Dad, I'm thirsty. Ethan bent down and lifted him into his arms, breathing in the warm, sweet scent of his hair. All right, buddy, let's get you some water. On the way downstairs, they passed Naomi's room. Light spilled through the narrow crack. Her voice soft as she read to Lucas. Ethan paused. Emily's words echoed. Don't let them go just because you're afraid. He closed his eyes for a moment, then kept walking, but now with something steady inside him. Because some nights, a promise to the dead is what opens the future for the living. By morning, the sunlight slid across the hardwood floors in pale ribbons. Ethan woke earlier than usual, not to the alarm, but to the words of Emily's letter. still vivid in his mind. In the kitchen, Naomi stood with her back to him, hair tied up, an oversized beige sweater falling past her hips. She was stirring cocoa for Lucas, while Liam swung his legs from his chair, cradling a mug of milk. Ethan lingered at the doorway, sunlight catching them in a frame so warm it made him ache. The truth was impossible to ignore. Now this kitchen had only felt alive since she came. "Morning," he said, his voice lower, warmer. She turned slightly. "Oh, morning. Cocoa for Lucas, milk for Liam." He nodded, poured his coffee, but didn't drink it. His gaze lingered on her, and before he could stop himself, "Thank you for staying." She froze for a second, eyes widening. "What do you mean?" "I know this isn't an easy job, and I know I'm not the easiest man to work for, but I want you to know. I see what you do for the boys, and I appreciate it." Naomi pressed her lips together, as if weighing her words. Then she said simply, "I'm here for them." Ethan nodded, but in his chest, a quieter truth echoed, "I'll find a way to make you stay. For me." As she tidied the table, he watched each movement, sure and unhurried, from wiping crumbs to tying Liam's shoelace. Just before he left the kitchen, his voice dropped, meant only for her. "Naomi, if there's ever a reason you think about leaving, I hope you'll tell me first." She looked up, met his eyes for a beat, and gave the smallest nod. He walked away, knowing that something had shifted. Sometimes, the simplest words are the first step in pulling someone closer. Part 9. The Proposal to Stay. The early morning sky seemed dusted with a thin layer of crystal, sunlight slipping through the tall, floor-to-ceiling windows, scattering gold across Ethan's luxurious kitchen. The rich aroma of Arabica coffee from the high-end espresso machine mingled with the scent of waffles Naomi was baking. Ethan descended the stairs, his charcoal gray suit tailored perfectly to his tall frame. But instead of heading straight to the dining table, as he usually did, he paused at the kitchen threshold, eyes following Naomi's every movement. She wore a simple white blouse, sleeves rolled past her elbows, hair tied neatly, her face tilted slightly as she inspected a tray of waffles. The morning light caressed the contours of her face, making the whole scene feel suspended in time. He suddenly realized, for months now, this had been the painting he had grown accustomed to. And now, he couldn't imagine this kitchen without her presence. "Good morning," Ethan said, his voice deeper and warmer than usual. Naomi looked up, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "Good morning. Coffee as usual?" she asked. "Yeah, but today, I think I'll drink it here, with you and the kids." Naomi froze for a moment, blinking, then nodded softly. For her, it was just a simple statement, but for Ethan, it was the first step breaking the habit of keeping his distance. A seemingly ordinary morning, yet in every little gesture, Ethan had quietly prepared a proposal that could change everything. Lucas sat in his high chair, babbling for his first bite of waffle. Liam ate while telling Naomi about the robot drawing he had made at school. Laughter mingled with the clinking of spoons and plates, forming a simple, everyday symphony that Ethan hadn't heard in this house since Emily passed away. He didn't speak much. He just sat there, eating slowly, but his gaze kept returning to Naomi. The way she cut the waffles just small enough for Lucas, the way she leaned in patiently to listen to Liam. These small details reminded him of a line from Emily's letter. "Don't let her go, just because you're afraid of losing her." Ethan took a sip of coffee, the mild bitterness on his tongue, blending with the warmth swelling in his chest. As breakfast drew to a close, Naomi stood to clear the table. Ethan spoke unexpectedly. "Naomi, when the kids take their nap later, I want to talk to you, just the two of us." Naomi hesitated, then nodded. A rare spark of determination lit Ethan's eyes. He was no longer just observing. He was deliberately creating a private space to say something important. That afternoon, the house sank into quiet once the children were asleep. Naomi stepped into the kitchen to find Ethan standing by the counter, a glass of water in hand, light streaming through the window, highlighting the veins in his hand. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked. Ethan drew a deep breath and set the glass down. "I want you to stay, not just for a few weeks or months, but long terms." Naomi froze. "Ethan, I only agreed to work here temporarily until you found someone new. I know, but I've searched and no one can make the kids feel the way you do." He stepped closer, holding her gaze. "I'm not saying this as an employer. I'm saying it as a father and as a man who knows the value of what he's about to lose." Naomi remained silent, fingers curling slightly. Inside, 100 reasons to leave clashed with one reason to stay, and that reason was standing right in front of her. Ethan had officially expressed his desire to keep Naomi, shattering the boss-employee barrier entirely. Naomi turned away, moving toward the sink to avoid his eyes. "Ethan, I'm scared that one day all of this could disappear, and I'd lose more than I ever had." He stepped closer, standing behind her without touching. "Naomi, I can't promise there won't be challenges, but I promise, if you stay, I won't let you face any of it alone." She gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "You know, sometimes staying is harder than leaving." "I know," he replied firmly, "and that's why I want you to know I'll do everything to make staying the right choice." His words made Naomi turn back to look at him. Ethan's eyes no longer guarded, only raw sincerity shining through. They stood in silence for a few seconds that stretched endlessly. Then Naomi exhaled, nodding softly. "All right, but I'm staying for the kids. I accept that reason. As long as you stay," Ethan said, the corner of his lips lifting slightly. He extended his hand, not as a cold, formal handshake, but as a personal vow. Naomi studied it for a moment, then placed her hand in his. Warm, slow, carrying the feeling of a new beginning. From upstairs, Liam's giggles echoed down, breaking the tension. Naomi pulled her hand back, but Ethan knew. Today, he had held on to what mattered most. Her agreement to stay, though, for the reason for the kids, was in truth a turning point, opening a new chapter for both of them. Part 10. Graduation Day. The auditorium of West Briar Teachers College gleamed like a picture frame lined with glass. Blue and white banners swayed gently from the ceiling, reflecting warm patches of light onto the polished wooden floor. The scent of fresh paper, the fabric of graduation gowns, and hydrangea petals pinned to the chairs mingled into an aroma, both formal and gentle, as if the entire room had been built solely to uphold the moment of growth for those who had traveled a long road. Naomi stood in the third row, wearing a flat cap and a black gown that hugged her slender frame. On her left shoulder lay a silver sash awarded to outstanding graduates. As the ceremony coordinator called the roll once more, alphabetically, Naomi pressed her lips together and inhaled deeply, her hand hidden in her sleeve, lightly gripping the crumpled program. Her heart beat in steady, low thumps, reminding her that a new life awaited, different from the one she had dreamed of at 18, but a ripened version, quieter, deeper, more valuable. In the row behind her, Ethan sat between his two sons. His midnight blue suit, perfectly tailored, couldn't mask the anxious glint in his eyes. Liam clutched a crayon-drawn sign. "Go, Mom." The letters wobbled, with streaks of blue still smeared across his palms. Lucas held a white cardboard adorned with a glittery silver heart, the result of hours he'd patiently glued together the night before. In large letters, Ethan had helped write, We love you, Naomi. Dad, when is it Mom's turn? Liam whispered, trying not to disturb the person next to him. But excitement lifted his voice slightly. Ethan leaned down, resting a hand lightly on his son's neck, a gesture of quiet reassurance. Soon, son, when they call Brooks. Yeah, we'll stand up fast. Okay. Lucas leaned close, whispering into Ethan's ear. I'll shout loud, really loud, so Mom can hear me. Ethan laughed, a rare smile reaching his eyes. In that moment, he was no longer the CEO controlling an empire through numbers and contracts. He was just a man hoping to hear the name of the woman who had pulled his household from the murky swamp. Emily's letter echoed softly in his memory. Don't let that person walk away just because you're afraid of losing them. He wouldn't let Naomi go, and today he was right here. The music shifted. The school band struck up a booming rhythm that marked the start of the roll call. The program coordinator, a silver-haired woman with her hair neatly pinned, stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and spoke clearly. We now honor the graduates of the Early Childhood Education Program. A wave of applause swept the auditorium. Naomi felt her knees weaken slightly, as if the ground had softened beneath her shoes. She looked up, her eyes following the stage lights, slicing thin streaks across the rows of gowns. From somewhere in the warm murmur, she heard a small laugh, the laugh that had carried her through the darkest nights. Elijah, she's there, right? That imagined voice made Naomi's eyes sting. She blinked, not to hold back tears, but to preserve the memory of tiny hands once tightly grasping hers. Names flew by as each student stepped forward, bowed, and received their diploma like picking up a personal star. Naomi stepped back, giving room for the classmate ahead. When Baker was called, then Bishop, then Briggs, her chest tightened. Each syllable was a drumbeat. Almost there. Naomi Brooks, Bachelor of Early Childhood Education. The microphone carried her name farther, deeper, like dropping a coin into an ancient well. In the brief, silent pause, Naomi felt her heart answer. Ethan sprang to his feet, as if a string had been plucked inside him. Go. Mom, Liam shouted at the top of his lungs, holding the sign above his head. Not to be outdone, Lucas arched his body and shouted along. We love you. Naomi, a few people ahead, turned, smiling, some chuckling at the innocent enthusiasm. But Ethan paid no mind to etiquette. He clapped until his hands ached, each clap firm, solid, like staking a claim for a new home. He saw Naomi glance toward them before stepping onto the stage. Just a fleeting second, enough for their eyes to meet. In them, he glimpsed something he had never dared imagine. Peace without defense, belonging without asking permission. Each step up the stage felt like ripples under Naomi's feet. Memories flashed, her mother's thin hands wiping Elijah's sweat. Long night shifts at the diner when she had dropped college. Her first bus to the Carter estate on a gray morning. Lucas's fevered cries. Lullabies she sang in blackouts. Lucas's first smile, the icebreaker in Ethan's chest. Each memory was a paving stone, guiding her into the light. The principal handed her the diploma. Naomi reached out. Her fingers no longer shook. The thick paper, its gilded edge brushing her skin, felt like a long, unnamed past finally called by name. Arrived. Thank you, she whispered, her ceremonial mask falling away. Her joy. Genuine. Congratulations, Naomi. The principal tilted her head. You will be an amazing teacher. Naomi bowed, pressing the diploma to her chest like one treasures a long-awaited letter. As she turned to step down, the lights no longer blinded her. They were warm and deep, laying a foundation of trust beneath her feet. Down in the audience, Ethan felt his hand find Lucas's. Instinctively, He bent and whispered into his son's ear. Remember today, son? This is the day your mom accomplished what only the brave dare start. Lucas nodded vigorously. The glitter on the sign shimmered. Liam could no longer sit still, tugging Ethan's sleeve. Dad, look. Mom looked at me before going on stage. I saw it. Ethan smiled, knowing it was more than just polite acknowledgement from Naomi. It was an invisible thread connecting them through a sea of people, a fleeting blink saying thousands of unspoken thank yous. Naomi passed by their row to return to her seat, and in that brief moment, Lucas jumped up, running to hug her legs. A ceremony staffer stepped forward, but the principal waved them off with a gentle smile. Naomi bent down, embracing Lucas, the smell of new paper mixed with childhood sweat, warm enough that she wanted to stay there forever. I'm proud of you, Mom, Lucas whispered, barely audible, as if fearing that louder words might break something fragile. I'm proud of you, too, Naomi replied. When she lifted her eyes, she met Ethan's gaze. He said nothing, just nodded a nod, not of ceremony, but of shared passage through the storm. Naomi hugging her diploma, Lucas hugging Naomi, Ethan embracing her with his eyes, the three circles never touching yet tied into a knot of family. Music rose again, pulling Naomi back to her graduation seat. She sat, the diploma across her lap, hands clasped around it like holding a heartbeat. At the back, a window opened slightly, a breeze stirring the flag. Naomi remembered Emily's letter, that Ethan had read a letter that had permitted him to love again. Gratitude warmed her from sternum to throat. Thank you, Emily, she whispered, not in request, but in acknowledgement of unseen support. As hats flew, the sky above the campus burst with hundreds of black caps like birds released from cages. Naomi didn't throw hers. She held it tightly, guarding a milestone. At the edge, Ethan hoisted Liam onto his shoulders. Lucas held his hand. All three, craning their necks at the sky, showered with tiny snowflakes. Ribbons fluttering down. Cheers! Camera clicks and calls of names formed a raucous symphony around them. Ethan pulled the two boys close, taking a photo. In the frame, Naomi stood on the steps, gown fluttering, cap secure, her smile unguarded. The photo captured a moment, but deeper still was the feeling. From today, the notion of us carried a new meaning. As people began to disperse, Naomi walked slowly across the grass, pausing beneath a spreading maple. Ethan and the children approached. They stood in a small circle under the golden noon sun, time slowing, all sounds receding. Ethan reached out, touching the edge of the diploma, then placed his hand over hers, holding it between their palms. Waiting at home for another ceremony, he said, voice hoarse with restrained joy. For Liam, for Lucas, and everything we are about to do together. Naomi's eyes welled. She nodded, words unnecessary. In that nod was the journey behind, from frozen kitchen sinks to the glowing auditorium today. Far away, the campus clock tolled 12, each chime marking a new rung in life's ladder. Naomi placed the cap on Liam's head, adjusting it. Lucas handed her the glittery sign to hold, as if to bind his pride into her hands. They crossed the lawn, leaving the glittering ribbons behind. With every step, Ethan felt lighter. Reports, glass meeting rooms, and tough deals shrank behind a single thought. This afternoon, they would go home, eat cake, sing lullabies, and hang this. The sunset spilled across the stone steps like golden syrup. The last light of day filtered through the row of maples on the porch, casting trembling leaf-shaped shadows on the living room wall, like the faint outline of a song yet to be played. Ethan dimmed the overhead lights, leaving only the two floor lamps tucked beside the sofa. The warm, low glow made the wide room seem as if it were bowing down. Whispering softly, Naomi carried Lucas to the couch, while Liam clutched the frayed-edged Scottish blanket that the two boys always fought over each evening. Against the wall, resting on a shelf, lay a wooden guitar, one Ethan had bought on a whim years ago, but had barely touched since the accident. He paused for a beat, then stepped forward, lifting the instrument, his thumb brushing lightly over the thin layer of dust on its surface. "Dad, you can play." Liam's eyes were wide, a mix of disbelief and excitement. I just forgot for a while," Ethan replied with a gentle smile. He pulled up a chair opposite the three of them, tuned the strings, and the soft, warm click, click of the chords filled the room. Naomi tucked her legs beneath her on the sofa, the blanket draped over her knees. Lucas rested against her lap, eyes bright with anticipation. There was something in this scene she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. The instrument brushing against the air, the scent of wood polish, the whisper of leaves outside. Nights like these had once lulled Elijah through exhaustion. Now, she sat here, not alone, with music approaching her like an old friend. Ethan tried a G chord. The room seemed to inhale gently along with it. He looked up at Naomi. "Shall we start? Your song." Naomi nodded. She didn't stand. She sang from the heart of a mother cradling her child. The old melody unfolded, thin at first, like a single thread, then thickening and warming like a scarf. Ethan followed with steady chords, not to show off, but to let her voice take center stage. By the second chorus, Liam giggled and tried to hum along, offbeat, but it was precisely that imperfection that made the three of them laugh, not to correct it, but to remember that happiness has the right to stumble. Naomi shifted to a lower harmony in the final line, giving Ethan space to let his voice float. He sang softly, almost a breath, each word steeped in the long, silent nights of the past. "Sleep, little hearts. The world can wait. Here in our hands, you're brave. You're safe." Those two English lines he had reworked from Emily's lullaby years ago, adding a line for the present. Naomi heard, and for a moment, she saw a bridge in the lyrics, one bank of memory, the other of tomorrow. In the middle, they stood together, not rushing, just holding hands so the wind wouldn't blow them off the railing. On the final, sustained note, Ethan glanced at Naomi. She nodded faintly, as if to say, "You're home now." He answered with a soft D chord, his left hand trembling, not from fear, but from relief. Lucas clapped lightly, afraid to break the fragile moment. "Again, Dad." But this time, Mom starts, Dad sings in the middle, and Liam and I will play drums. Ver. Play drums with what? Naomi laughed. With our knees. Liam pounded a loose rhythm on his lap, messy, unstructured, but full of pure enthusiasm. The second song began. Naomi's voice rose a little higher, her eyes falling on Lucas's hair from time to time, hand moving with the rhythm. Ethan played along, glancing at the diploma he had propped temporarily on the mantel before dinner. Naomi Brooks, Bachelor of Early Childhood Education. The silver-edged paper caught the floor lamp light, reflecting a thin streak across the glass. He would frame it properly tomorrow, but tonight he wanted it there. Part of the first family song in many winters. At the bridge, Ethan softened his touch, leaving space for the children's breaths to fill the room. Naomi lowered her voice to a whisper. The word home slipped from her lips like a secret spoken to the right person. Liam stopped drumming, leaning against his father, while Lucas clung to Naomi's hand. Both stared at the diploma as if it were a map guiding them out of the dense forest. The song ended on a note, not in the original silence. Ethan released the strings, letting the music fade. No one spoke. The quiet didn't demand words. It only required presence. Naomi broke it, but not with language. She set Lucas on the couch, draped the blanket over him, then walked to the mantel. The diploma waited. Patient, she touched a corner of the paper and looked back. "Where do you want it?" "In the spot where the afternoon sun hits," Ethan replied immediately, as if he'd thought about this for days. "So, every evening, passing by, we remember to thank the person who worked so hard for it." Naomi smiled slowly. A quiet yes. She turned back to him. "Not just one person, Ethan. Everyone. All four of us." Liam jumped up. "Then let's hang it now. I'll get the hammer." "No hammer needed." Ethan shook his head, mischief lighting his eyes. "I'll just place it on the hook." The family gathered. Naomi held the edges. Ethan supported the center. Liam and Lucas each touched a corner, like a small ritual. When the diploma settled into place, warmth filled the room. So tangible, Ethan imagined someone had lit an extra heater. He stepped back, arms around the two children. Naomi beside him, close enough for their shoulders to touch, but not too close. "All right." Ethan lowered his voice, as if afraid the diploma might fall from the wall from too much emotion. "Who's giving a speech?" "I am." Liam raised his hand. "Mom did so well today, and from now on, she'll teach me to draw robots." "Done." Lucas added, "Mom teaches me to sleep fast too. I sleep really fast when she sings." Naomi tilted her head, pretending to be serious. Two outstanding students have spoken, and the parents. Ethan looked at the three of them, then at the diploma, normally precise with words. Tonight, he chose simplicity. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for giving this room a heartbeat." And he turned to the boys. "Thank you both for choosing Mom. Even before Dad." Naomi couldn't hold back a laugh, mingled with tears. She stepped half a step closer, the distance between them shrinking enough for Ethan to catch the scent of orange blossoms in her hair. He wanted to take her hand, then decided not to. The restraint didn't diminish belonging. It reinforced a silent promise to go slow so they could go far. "Mom," Lucas tugged her sleeve. "One more song?" "Always." Naomi paused. "Always." The word the boy had unconsciously turned into the title of the lullaby she had sung twice on the night of the blackout. She looked at Ethan. He nodded. The guitar returned to his hands, strings whispering like an old friend greeting them. Naomi set the rhythm. Ethan supported. Liam and Lucas drummed with hands on cushions. By the chorus, Ethan laid the guitar down, singing softly into the boy's ears, letting Naomi carry the melody alone. Her voice was steady, an anchor guiding the room across a calm, reflective pool. When the final always faded, Naomi didn't cut it short. She extended 2 breaths. Ethan remained silent, just placing his hand lightly on Lucas's back, helping him drift to sleep. Liam yawned loudly, sniffling as he tried to stay awake for more. "Tomorrow," Naomi whispered, kissing each child's forehead. "There will be a song every day." Ethan stood behind her, hearing the words "every day" unravel in his chest like fireworks, spilling into every crevice of memory, smoothing rough edges. He stepped closer to Naomi. No words needed. She knew. The room knew. The diploma knew. The clock hands passed 9, ticking, steady, like a slow instrument. Both children breathed deeply. Naomi pulled the blanket up. Ethan dimmed one floor lamp. In that moment before half-light embraced the room, the 4 of them sat in silence, listening to a sound only a family could hear. Peace answering peace. After the graduation night, the house still carried laughter and the scent of warm apple pie. But Ethan didn't rush to his office. He lingered in the kitchen, hands hiding something behind his back, waiting for Naomi to finish washing the glasses. Naomi tilted her head, surprised to see him still there. "You don't have a meeting tonight?" "No. Tonight, I have other matters." Ethan smiled a boyish smile. More 18 than CEO, Ethan led her into the living room. Naomi's diploma still hung in its place, illuminated by the wall light. But beside it, an empty frame had been set up. He gestured for her to stand before it, then reached behind his back and pulled out a long gift box, wrapped in smooth cream-colored paper. "Open it!" Naomi unwrapped it, revealing a formal certificate, full scholarship, Master of Early Childhood Education, Columbia University part-time program. In the lower corner, a small line read, "Sponsored by the Emily Carter Foundation." She froze, eyes both teary and shining. "Ethan, this," Emily once said, "if one day someone stepped into this house and made the kids smile again, that person deserved to reach every dream of theirs." I'm just following her lead. Naomi clutched the paper, hands trembling. She had never imagined a master's degree. Her whole life, she only dreamed of earning enough to rent a small apartment, quiet enough to teach children. Now, her dream had grown, and there was someone by her side, ready to support it. Ethan stepped closer, the space between them only a few steps. "I don't know what the future will hold, but if you want to go, I'll take you there. If you want to stay, I'll build a whole world right here. Whatever you choose, you don't have to choose alone." For the first time since entering this house, Naomi took the initiative, closing the distance, and hugged him tightly. No words, no distant promises. But in that embrace, Ethan understood she had chosen to stay, not just in this house, but in his life. From upstairs, Liam and Lucas ran down, each clutching a colored pencil. "Mom, Dad, let's draw a picture to hang next to Mom's diploma," Liam exclaimed. "What picture?" Naomi wiped her eyes, trying to hide the catch in her voice. "A family picture," Lucas said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Ethan chuckled. "All right, but before we hang the picture," he gently took the diploma from Naomi's hands and placed it into the prepared frame. When the frame clicked onto the hook, the faint sound resonated like a promise firmly set. Naomi stood, her heartbeat slowing. Tonight, on that wall, she saw two diplomas, one for the present, one for the future, and between them was family. The whole family sat on the rug, spreading paper, turning on the warm yellow lights, and began to draw. No one spoke of tomorrow, because tomorrow already had its place on that wall. Night fell over the Carter garden like a deep blue silk scarf, draping over whispering maples. The small pond reflected the moonlight onto the ceiling, creating slow, shifting streaks of light, like the breath of someone who had just stopped crying. The sliding glass door opened slightly. The scent of lavender mingled with warm wood, guiding the bare footsteps of two boys as they ran past light. Quiet, then still. Ethan dimmed the lights in the living room, leaving only the low wall sconces. On the mantel, the two diplomas, one framed, one just hung rested side by side like two newly born stars. From the kitchen, Naomi brought out a tray with 4 cups of hot cocoa, topped with a thin layer of milk froth and sprinkled with cinnamon. She placed the tray on the low wooden table near the glass doors, overlooking the pond. "Let's have our final celebration before bed, okay?" she said, voice tired but warm, stirring something in the chest. "I want to hear always." Outside, Lucas pointed to the solitary rocking chair on the stone patio. Naomi paused, and Ethan glanced at it. The rocking chair had once been Emily's territory, a place he hadn't dared sit in nearly 3 years. Tonight, without a word, he stepped forward, resting his hand on the back. The wood was cold, but no longer made him shiver. "You sit." Ethan turned to Naomi. "Tonight, this chair belongs to the one who brought the song back to the house." Naomi lowered herself gently, as if afraid of spilling memories onto the stone floor. Liam draped the Scottish blanket over his mother's legs. Lucas climbed onto the edge of the chair, leaning against her side. Ethan placed a low armchair across from them, sitting with Liam. The gentle wind rippled across the pond, reflecting the moonlight onto Naomi's cheeks like soft silver fragments. "Dad, play, now." Liam nudged his father's side, whispering, as if afraid of breaking the moon. Ethan nodded, went inside, and brought out the guitar. When the first GDM chords rang out, Naomi leaned deeper into the rocking chair, her hand on Lucas's chest, feeling his tiny heartbeat gradually steady. She sang, not with a high or polished voice, but as if speaking through melody. Ethan joined in, a low harmony weaving under her. Like the pond, lifting a toddler's first steps, sleep, little hearts. The gentle notes brushing Naomi's shoulders, slipping into her hair like wind across the meadow. Inside, the warm yellow lights bathed the diplomas. Outside, the music formed an invisible canopy. 4 people, 1 rocking chair, they fit together perfectly, without explanation. On the chorus, Naomi held the word home longer than usual, and just then, a light breeze puffed the curtain, brushing Ethan's back. He froze, not from missing a note, but understanding the house had answered them. The song ended in the soft fading of the strings. No one clapped. Liam rubbed his eyes, burrowed into the blanket, knees on his dad's lap. Lucas held onto Naomi's coat, breathing evenly. The moon silently drifted behind a cloud, sprinkling silver dust across her hairline. Ethan set the guitar down, leaning slightly. "Back at school, did anyone ever lull you to sleep?" Naomi shook her head. "Not at school. Only my grandmother and my brother." When Elijah was exhausted, I sang twice in a row. He'd say, "Don't stop. The waves are bringing me home." Ethan pressed his lips together. A quiet moment passed over the patio, sweet as the last sip of cocoa melting on the tongues. "Eriwa read that letter, just like you said." He looked straight into Naomi's eyes. In the letter, Emily told me not to let anyone leave out of fear. At first, I thought it meant holding on tightly. Today, I finally understand. Sometimes, holding on means letting them continue chasing their dreams. Naomi lowered her gaze to her cup, the cinnamon rising to sting her eyes. "Thank you for the scholarship." "I don't know. It's not a gift." Ethan shook his head softly. "It's part of that wall. Tonight, you built 2 large bricks. I just put in the mortar to hold them firm." She laughed through her tears, a small, lasting laugh. She reached out, not for his hand, but placed her hand on Liam's knee, pulling the blanket up to his chest. Ethan did the same for Lucas. Their hands met at the edge of the blanket, a barely there touch, enough to know they were standing on the same side. "Have you started drafting your thesis outline tomorrow?" Ethan asked, half teasing, half serious. "Tomorrow. I'll start by teaching the 2 of them how to draw a smiling rabbit." Naomi tilted her head, a rare, mischievous glint crossing her eyes. "The thesis can wait until evening." "Agreed." Ethan drew a deep breath, as if signing the longest-term agreement of his life. Above, a thin streak of cloud split in 2, revealing a fuller moon. Outside, insects whispered along the bamboo fence. Inside, the wall clock ticked past 10. The air carried a crisp chill. Ethan pulled the blanket a little tighter, his hand inadvertently resting atop Naomi's. This time, no translation was needed. She let it rest, leaning just a fraction enough for her hair to brush against his shirt. It wasn't a declaration of love, nor a kiss. It was 4 breaths sharing a rhythm. It was a lullaby sung on the chair that once belonged to memory. It was today's diploma leaning against tomorrow's. It was a hand resting on the blanket's edge. One gesture, one silent message. Here, Naomi softly hummed the chorus. No guitar, just her breath. Ethan added an almost imperceptible lower harmony, like the sound of wind. Liam giggled in his sleep. Lucas shifted, his small hand finding Naomi's and locking like a tiny hook. She squeezed gently, memorizing that feeling in a secret drawer in her heart, a drawer reserved for things that would lose their magic if spoken aloud. Before sleeping, everyone should make a wish, Ethan whispered, as if creating a new ritual. No need to voice it, just keep it here. He pressed a hand to his chest. Naomi closed her eyes. She wished for courage, big enough to accept all love without guilt. She wished the two boys would never have to wonder where home is. She wished for the man across from her to have the right to feel tired when he needed. Ethan closed his eyes a beat later. He wished to continue learning how to love in the language of the present without letting the past misinterpret. He wished that the word always tonight would not just be a note, but a path. The wind shifted, carrying the gentle slap of water against the pond. Naomi opened her eyes and whispered, "Always." Ethan answered, "Always." They both looked through the glass inside. The light touched the two diplomas on the wall, outlining them in a soft halo. It wasn't glaring, not showy. It was the kind of light one sees when waking in the middle of the night, realizing they are no longer alone. Naomi lifted Lucas, and Ethan followed with Liam. They stepped over the threshold, not a door separating inside and outside, but the quiet door between what has passed and what is coming. On the wooden floor, 4 steps became 2 pairs, stopping before the wall. Naomi gently touched the edge of the scholarship frame. As if blessing a new path, Ethan touched the bachelor's degree frame, silently thanking the old path for bringing them here. "Tomorrow, we'll hang a small shelf underneath," Ethan said, "so the kids can place their drawings and leave space for future letters." Naomi smiled. "Letters to ourselves and to each other," Ethan added softly. The children were already dozing. Naomi stood, placing Lucas in the crib. Ethan lowered Liam onto the sofa, pulling the blanket up, then turned back. Naomi stood right there under the spotlight, needing no extra halo. Their eyes met, unhurried, unembarrassed. "Sleep now," she said. "Yeah," he replied. "Tomorrow will be long. We have many always tasks to do." They dimmed the lights one, then another, leaving a small strip of light at the base of the wall where the diplomas rested. Outside, moonlight streamed through the glass, forming a slender silver line perfectly centered between the frames, like a connecting dash in the warm darkness before the living room door closed. Naomi whispered a tiny lullaby, like a soft period at the end of a closed book. "Sleep, my home. Wake up tomorrow, still loving each other." And the door closed gently, leaving 4 steady breaths behind. On the wall, the remaining tiny glow flickered like a firefly on night watch. It guarded an unspoken promise. From now on, this family would no longer sleep alone. No one would sing alone. No one would grow up alone. The lamp stays on. Tonight, the living room glowed brighter than usual, not because of the ceiling lights, but because of an indescribable warmth, passing from one person to another, like a candle shared hand to hand. Naomi sat in the middle of the sofa, Lucas and Liam on either side, heads resting on her shoulders. Ethan sat opposite, holding Emily's old wooden guitar. He strummed a few opening chords, eyes on Naomi, as if asking a silent question. She nodded and began to sing the lullaby that had marked every turning point of this house. Her voice was soft, unpolished, yet it struck the deepest corners of memory. This time, Ethan harmonized from the start, his low tone a steady foundation. The boys giggled as Ethan occasionally altered the words into little jokes, then fell silent when Naomi stretched the word home like a silk thread. The song ended, yet no one wanted to rise. Their laughter merged with the wind outside, forming a sound that made this vast house suddenly shrink just right for a family. Ethan set down the guitar, leaning forward. Emily once told me something, and now I finally understand. Family doesn't require blood. It only needs hearts willing to stay. Naomi looked down at the two boys dozing on her shoulders. She smiled, and in that moment, fear, doubt, and the feeling of being an outsider melted like vapor. They made no promises about the future. They only knew that tonight they were here and would continue to stay tomorrow. Outside, the wind carried the scent of lavender indoors. The floor lamp in the corner remained on small, but enough for anyone waking in the night to realize they were no longer alone. Family doesn't require blood. It only needs hearts willing to stay. Do you believe a stranger can become your family? Share your story in the comments and rate this story from 0 to 10. Don't forget to follow so you won't miss the next story, because perhaps what you're looking for is right there in a lullaby.